Great. Thank you, General Pogge. Really appreciate the opportunity to say hello to everyone that is dialing in. We're starting about 25 people and hopefully ramping up to 70 or 80 or so a little later on as this progresses. For the Civil Affairs Association, I'm the president, Hugh Roosen. I am delighted to open up the second part of this year's roundtable presentation and discussion. And Special thanks to all of the individuals that are presenting today and to our international partners that are dialing in to help participate and add to the discussion on civil-military cooperation or coordination and civil affairs in a worldwide setting. So with this, we do have a couple of additions that we'll be touching that are sort of housekeeping. One will be the issue of our issue papers that will be presented this year at our symposium on the 13th through the 15th of November in Simi Valley, California. I hope many of you will have the opportunity to attend that as well. We also will very briefly talk about the core awards program and where that's going. But with that, back over to you, Caroline.
Thanks, sir. I'm actually going to pass it to General Goddard to talk about the issue papers. Let me get that back up. You hopefully can see the one-pager.
Yeah, okay. Got it, Carolyn. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Brigadier General Glenn Goddard. I am the Vice President for Publications. And I, along with our esteemed steering committee for publications, consisting of Chris and Dennis, kind of the usual suspects. We've done this several years in a row now. And proudly, I can say now it's been over 10 years where the Civil Affairs Association has done a call for papers and then published the top 5 winners in a booklet that then will go out to all commands. So what you're contributing to as part of this effort is something where you have the chance to influence up to the 4-star level. So that is part of the incentive for you to provide your voice to civil affairs and to inform others on what we can do, how we can better be utilized, structured, or whatever your great ideas are. So the guidance for this year is issued, and similar to last year, we are casting a broad net here in the subject. So if you want to write about large-scale combat operations, if you want to write about irregular warfare, if you want to write about the latest on civil knowledge integration, all of those are valid topics, and we encourage a diverse point of view because what we're looking for ultimately out of this is to have a substantial number of papers. So we have a real contest. To give a slight history here, so for 2023 and 24, we only had 5 and 6 papers respectively. Not really much of a contest because we have to have that minimum in order to create a booklet, as you can imagine. But last year, with a more open format, we had 13 submissions. So it was a very good contest. The papers committee will evaluate all those, rack and stack, and narrow them down to the top 5. From then on, though, it's up to the presentations that are made at the symposium, and then those are voted on. So regardless of where you are in the 1 to 5, anyone can win it at that point. Your presentation will matter quite a bit. So practice those. And but in the meantime, you have this summer to start working on this. Commonly, these are teams of 2 or 3 authors that put this together. So we highly encourage that. And to start working on this, the deadline nominally is by the end of August. And then in September, October, we'll start our evaluation process. I should note, anyone who wants to be part of the evaluation committee, and I've received a couple of volunteer hands raised, send me an email and we'll add you to the list. We do like having about a dozen people to evaluate all of the various papers, and Also, typically out of that group, we'll select a coach for each paper to have them go through and try to, influence the paper to be presented in the best way, because you have not only the written word, but your oral presentation that will all matter. So if you have any questions on any of this, if you want to know, hey, can I write something on Ukraine, Gaza, Iran? The answer is yes, but send it to the publications committee and we will be happy to do that. Lastly, I want to point out that we've raised the price level. We've essentially doubled it from before. So first place is now $2,500, second place $1,000, and third place $500. So that's an added incentive for you to put a little time into writing a winning paper here. And we look forward to receiving your submissions and to answer any questions. I will say lastly that if you do not get selected as one of the top 5 for presentation, we are very much about trying to help you get published in another venue, the Small Wars Journal or Parameters at the Army War College. We'll give you professional guidance from people like myself and others that have been professionally published and help guide you on that way. So again, make sure you follow the guidelines as they're published mainly in the length and the formatting. We don't like to go back and tell somebody that they've written something in the wrong Times New Roman or whatever it is. Please follow that. Just be kind to the reviewers. And we look forward to receiving those submissions. We expect to have another great year in our call for papers. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Glenn. Are there any questions for Glenn before we shift gears? I know it's always
Carolyn.
Go ahead, Chris.
I just to add to General Goddard's presentation, this call for papers will be posted shortly after this roundtable. It'll be on the association website and sent out on email. So if you are not yet registered with the Civil Affairs Association, go on the website and make sure that you subscribe so that when the announcement comes out on the call for papers and on the symposium and so on, you'll get that.
Fantastic. Great advice. And it's been interesting to see the papers. I've been one of the readers myself. And so seeing all the different perspectives on how to attack this beast has been always an exciting part of that process. So I definitely encourage you all to grab the pens or I guess now it's not a pen and a typewriter, but grab your computers and get brainstorming. So you've got some time. And as Glenn said, if anybody's got any questions along the way, there's either some folks who have published in the past that I think are always welcome to kind of help you spur through the ideas. And then obviously Glenn and his team on the publication side of the house. All right, hearing no other questions or comments, we're going to shift gears quickly to Winfield Scott. JP Lecedri is unable to be here tonight. He's actually in Europe right now, TDY, so I'm going to pinch hit for him on the medallions. But the big piece that we want to just reinforce is if you haven't considered nominating folks for Winfield Scott medallions, please consider to do so. It's a great way to recognize folks that have been involved with civil affairs or been significant contributors to our branch over time. It continues to be our benchmark award for the branch, not just for the Army, but also members throughout other services as well. So there continues to be a bronze, silver, and gold. This was changed slightly, I think a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago now. The bronze is the most common. About 80-90% of the folks will end up with a bronze initially, and those are for folks that have completed full tenure as a team leader or team sergeant, and is kind of the benchmark entry award for level of awards for the award process. The silver medallion is generally for those who have completed either battalion or brigade command or command sergeant major or equivalent, and given to those who have contributed to the civil affairs community at large. And finally, the gold award, which is a bit more rare, is reserved for senior leaders and those substantially contributing to our profession over a longer period of time. These are generally given just a couple each year, but recognition of long-term service. In the past, the silver and gold had been a little bit looser, but the policies, like I said, had revised, and you can find all that on the association website. There has been an increase in demand, which is great. That is a good problem to have, but the awards committee is definitely getting a little bit bogged down and has caused some delays. So we just about doubled our award requests in the past year. So I just want folks to be patient as we walk through all the process of reviewing and processing the awards and getting them back out to recipients. This has been a bit of a delay in the shipment side of things, but we are getting the additional supplies necessary to do that so that can continue to happen. So everybody that's been submitted, you should be receiving feedback by as late as mid-June. That should be catching up on any of the awards that were sent in over the springtime. And then the last thing JP wanted to relay is there's current work being done between USARPAC and SWCC to ensure that the proper authorities are there for both awarding the medals as well as wearing them at official functions like changes of command or dining out or other types of things. So that information should be posting on our website as well as distributed to our members in the near future. So please look for a membership-wide email coming out in the near future regarding medallions, as well as we encourage you to keep submitting them and sending any requests for information to awards@civilaffairsassoc.org. So the awards email. And yeah, any questions on the Winfield Scott medallions? All right, hearing none, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. But I see Anthony is here. Anthony, is your whole panel already on?
No, I'm just waiting on one individual. He should be on shortly.
Okay. Once you've got your panel all up, we'll get started. I don't want to panic them when they sign on right away. But for now, if we just want to hold loose for probably 3 or 4 minutes while that last person signs on, we're about 8 minutes ahead of schedule. So I appreciate everyone's patience.
I think we are ready to go.
All right, Anthony, I'm going to let you introduce your group. And so, yeah, we'll pass it over to 350th CACOM and hear what you've got to share about Southcom.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Ibrahim. I'm a 38 Golf assigned to the 350th Civil Affairs Command in Pensacola, Florida. Before we get started, I just want to address one housekeeping item. The views and statements made during our presentation today are personal views and do not necessarily represent the Department of War or its components. On behalf of 350th Civil Affairs Commander Colonel Scheck and Sergeant Major Harvey, I would like to thank the Civil Affairs Association for inviting us to be a part of the roundtable discussion tonight. As you all know, the current administration is forging ahead, tackling geopolitical matters that in many cases have grown counter to U.S. interests for decades. This is most evident in the Western Hemisphere in the cases of Cuba and Venezuela. Being geographically aligned with the Western Hemisphere Command, our discussion today will focus on Venezuela. With that, allow me to briefly introduce my friend and colleague, Major Victor Ortiz. Victor recently joined the 350th Civil Affairs Command and was previously assigned to the 478th Civil Affairs Battalion. Victor has his educational background. He completed high school and college in Venezuela before immigrating to the United States. After immigrating to the United States, he completed his civil engineering equivalency at Florida International University in Miami, Florida. He also holds a master's in business administration from Nova Southeastern University. Victor has 25 years of civil engineering experience managing critical civil infrastructure, most recently with the Miami Seaport and now with the Federal Reserve. He lives in Pembroke Pines, Florida, and is married to his wife of 7 years, who's a medical doctor. We ask you to put your questions in the chat as we go through our presentation this evening. And at the end, we hope to have a discussion and answer any questions that come up in the chat. So without any further ado, I turn the floor over to my colleague, Victor Ortiz.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? If I can get a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. So if we can go to the next slide, appreciate it. Thank you. So I would like to get started with a brief summary on the country. In the case of Venezuela, it's situated north of South America, bordering on the north side with the Caribbean, western side Colombia, south side Brazil, and the eastern side neighboring with Guyana. One of the things that we are going to cover as part of this presentation will be what will be the priority in a potential civil affairs effort in the country. Our presentation is going to circle around the core concepts of what we deem will be extremely important as far as our efforts, and that hones in into energy, transportation, and security. Okay. And one topic also that we'd like to discuss will be how we go into the topic of energy. When we're talking about energy in Venezuela, the primary point that comes to mind is it's the big reserve that we have in the middle of the country called the Orinoco Belt. And this is the home of what is being considered one of the most difficult oils to refine in the industry. Venezuela, as many know, it holds right now one of the largest reserves in the world for oil, but also has gas and other precious minerals. So our presentation is going to cover how we're going to be looking at the restoration of the oil economy, but particularly to see what kind of explorations they have around the Orinoco Belt. Also, the role they plays the critical infrastructure to support the refinement of that oil. And in addition to that, we'll touch base on some of the environmental issues that have had the country for the past few years, particularly in the northwestern portion of the country in the Lake Maracaibo, where environmental incidents have become something very recurrent. And lastly, we're going to be covering, or we're going to be discussing issues related to the power grid and the current stance of the energy sector in the country, and how that has an impact into critical infrastructure like the oil industry. Next. So what we're seeing here is a pictorial that shows one is what you see in the middle of the country, what it's considered to be the Orinoco Belt. This is the area where we can find the extra heavy oil that it's been, explored for, or exploited for, a pretty good, last 30, 40 years. On the northwestern side, I mentioned the area of Lake Maracaibo. That's the area that is neighboring with Colombia. This is the area where there's been a lot of exploration and production from the platforms for many years. As a matter of fact, one of the first oil drills that was placed in Venezuela back in the 20s was in this area. And on the northern portion of the country, you are going to see areas where they have been already found on-the-ground locations for gas, natural gas. The northwest side, particularly, it's been an area of the north. Yes, that's on the northeast and also on the northwest. That's been the area where there have been recent encounters of or productions of natural oil reserves and gas reserve as well. So we're going to be talking about how that comes into play as far as looking at the prospect of improving the production of the Venezuelan energy sector. Next. So when we're talking about the main efforts and projects that are taking place in the country, we're going to have to mention the three major projects they're covering in two different areas. So let's just start with the the gas portion of that, which is the La Perla field. As a matter of fact, if I go from the top down, will be the project number one, the Dragon gas field, Mariscal Sucre. That's on the northeast side of the country, as we were showing before. And this is an area in which is bordering with Trinidad and Tobago. So it is worth mentioning that in this location, there is already a private sector production in extraction of natural gas on the Trinidad side, and this particular reserve of natural gas, it goes between the two countries. So it will be very strategic to find a way to see how the private sector, or at least the same companies, can do both works in both in the Venezuelan and also on the side of the Trinidad, when it comes down to making this particular finding highly productive. On the second project, the platform number two, which is on the Delta side, this is more close to the border with Guyana. This is currently also being extracted by American support companies, and it will be very beneficial as well to see how an agreement can be fostered to make sure that from both sides of the border, companies are working in tandem to make sure that the extraction is efficient and production goes to the levels they are expected. And lastly, we're going to touch base on the project number three, which is La Perla. This is on the north east side of the country. This is also in the area offshore in the border between Venezuela and Aruba and Curacao. So this is also another huge area of exploration. We're going to touch base on that very soon. And one of the things that we want to highlight will be how critical the role of the private sector will be on this. You have companies like Shell, Exxon, and Chevron, which in the case of offshore extraction, Shell is very well positioned to extract some of these platforms. As a matter of fact, they're already working on the area on Trinidad. So they will be one of the companies very well positioned to help the reconstruction and also increase the production of natural gas. Chevron and ExxonMobil, they're very well positioned in Venezuela to work on the oil platforms inland, particularly when we're talking about the extra heavy oil. And we'll touch base on that as well. So the implication of this to our civil affairs operations will be the teams pretty much need to be aware of this reality and try to work towards securing these economic zones and surface liaisons to manage expectations and also protect foreign investments. What I'm saying is there is no way private sector can come to the country to do investments if they don't feel protected or they don't feel there's some guarantees, which we're going to touch base on the next slides. Next. So this is a snip of the project on the northeastern side, Lake of Maracaibo, that we just discussed. Is close to Aruba and Curacao. And just to give an idea on how massive this is, La Perla discovery happened in 2009, and since then, what we have found is that it holds about, the whole country holds about 35% stake in the asset because other companies has been brought in to work on that. But so far has been confirmed that it has about 461 billion cubic meters of recoverable gas. To look into having a peak reserve of this will be a 9 cubic meters of that per day, to peak to 36 million cubic meters, which is the expectation by 2036. It is worth mentioning that production currently in Venezuela is nowhere near these targets. So, but also it's kind of painting the picture on how this can really make the difference in the market should this go into a higher production rate. Next. So now we go to the other side of the country, the northwest eastern side of the country. This is making reference to the two projects that I was mentioning before, project number 2, which is La Perla next to Trinidad and Tobago. So the portions there that you see as a Dragon and Mejillones, Patal, and Rio Caribe. So these are platforms in which extraction is taking place on both sides of the country. So it is important, again, to have a very good understanding on how the operations are taking place on the Trinitarian side. So any operations on the Venezuelan side takes place, again, in a very efficient way and fashion. And not only that, there's already infrastructure that has been built in this area to extract or to transport the gas to inland. And the support of the private sector in ensuring that these operations, if anything, actually get improved and the extraction actually goes to a higher levels, it's going to be paramount. Next. And then this one is the one that gets closer to Guyana, which is the Delta project, one of the largest ones and the most recent ones, discoveries in the nation when it comes down to gas. We're talking about somewhere in the 206 billion cubic meters of gas. And this is something that it also is falling right at the border between Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, and also neighboring Guyana. One of the things very particular about this scenario is that this project has been divided in blocks. And so far, block 1 has been one of the blocks with the most promising production. And the amount of gas coming out of that could be exponentially higher should the investment in technology into this infrastructure is made. Next one. So now we're going to be moving to the second leg, which is transportation. So something very critical for the civil affairs operations in the country will be to take a very hard look to the transportation infrastructure, starting with seaports and airports. Seaports, from the most part, they have two main ports at the center of the country, at the center, the north center, and also the northeast. That will be Puerto Cabello, and the second one is La Guaira, next to the capital. These two ports are responsible for handling over two-thirds of the imports coming to the country. And the third and fourth most important ports are Guanta and Maracaibo, which are in both extremes of the country, and they account for the remaining piece of the cargo coming to the country. It is worthwhile to mention that in the case of the two main ports, Puerto Cabello and La Guaira, their current conditions are pretty dire. They have main issues with the loading arms, the uh, uh, cranes, the onshore cranes, as well as the transportation coming in and out. One of the things that you may find in many other places in the world, when you have a productive, a very high with high traffic, in cargo in some of these ports, is that you have different modes of transportation connecting to those ports. Primarily, you're talking about not only roadway, but you're also talking about railway. In the case of these two main ports in Venezuela, rail connection to those ports, it's non-existent. So that will be something to take a look at in order to look for an effective movement of goods, not only about oil, but also other goods necessary to increase the production and also to improve the economy in the country. Oil terminals, they have two major ones, one in the state of Anzoátegui, which is the Jose oil terminal. This is a critical oil node which receive oil from different platforms around the country and different extraction sites. The main issue that they have there as of right now, and this is as of today going through some renovations, it's loading arms, storage tanks, and pipelines need immediate attention and reconstruction. Unfortunately, this is one of those critical pieces of infrastructure that has been neglected for the past 20 years. And in order to increase productivity and also, the output of refinement, investment in this critical infrastructure will be very important. Next one, as mentioned before, the very critical piece of transportation and oil industry is that connection of rail network. And as of right now, this is something that needs to be looked at not only from the short term, but primarily if we want to have a sustainable long-term solution to the economic situation in the country. Having oil being transported via piping or in some cases via trucks to the port terminals, that can be a short-term solution, but long-term, you need to find a way to be able to put in some of the derivatives of the oil, be able to be transported in via railways. And lastly, speaking about the consequences, not having this in place definitely is going to hinder the output that we're expecting to have in this country in the foreseeable future. This is a pictorial showing the critical infrastructure in the country from the transportation perspective. One of the things I want to highlight is that when we speak in terms of first world countries of major arterial highways, you're talking about highways with 5-6 lanes on each direction plus median. So in the country right now, we don't have the country of Venezuela right now. They don't have something significant of that size. Right now, their main highway is called the ARC, Autopista Regional del Centro. That's the translation in Spanish. And it covers just a small portion that you can see from what it says Valencia all the way up to Puerto de Maracaibo. So it's on the middle side of the country, and also goes to Puerto Cabello, which is one of the main ports in the country. So the rest that you see on the pictorial shows what they call as troncales. Troncales meaning just simple roadway. You're talking about something that is two lanes on each direction, and in some places even less. But that's the main, I would say, feature or item of transportation when you're talking about highway system on the country. So looking at this and try to picture how the economic sector can develop, definitely you can see that the southern portion of the country, it is in need of further transportation infrastructure. And this is the section of the country that has a lot of illegal mining. There's a lot of mining industry on the south side of the country, including gold, cobalt, which is one of the rare minerals and needed for electronic equipment, and bauxita. So it's a different also material, very rare, and silver and so forth. So getting this industry also to get to a point where we can move it away from the illicit traffic or illicit exploitation and getting into a more regulated industry, and also something that can be of more contribution to the local economy, it's going to require a more developed transportation network. And on the north side, I think you're going to be able to see also the main ports. Ports in Venezuela are pretty much located in the center, east, and western portion of the country. When you look at the easternmost, the section next to Guyana, you see that they're not really a very well developed a port network, nor any port infrastructure. So for issues as far as supporting any oil exploration in any oil or gas extraction in the coast of the Delta, it will be very beneficial and strategic to have some sort of maritime port infrastructure supporting that operation. Next. So now that's a good segue to speak about security. And on this third leg, something that is worth mentioning, that it is going to be a challenge and an item to be to pay attention from the civil affairs perspective. One of the challenges of this country as of right now is the main security organizations. I'm talking about Sabine and DGCIM, which is the Army or the Military Intelligence Agency. These two agencies have been in coordination with our adversaries for a very long time. They are extremely corrupt. This is something that has become part of their SOP. It's how they have operated for a long time. This actually how they have gathered intelligence to develop relationship between different agencies and organizations in the country. And it's functioning. It has been functioned as an arm of the local administration to do repressions, to pursue oppositions, and things like that. So, having these agencies to pivot from that stance and going back into their traditional role is going to be a challenge, and specifically because it's going to be needed in order to provide the security environment that will be needed for foreign investments to come in. The second item on that will be the current stance of the military ranks. Venezuelan military also has gone through a 20 years where the officers that were really capable, competent, and had a lot of knowledge about the military doctrines and science have been weeded out, flushed out of the organization, and have been replaced with officers that have been loyal to the regime, and that has created a lack of professionalism within the armed forces, and also opened the channels for criminal organizations to infiltrate the ranks and creating cartels like the one that's been on the news, which is the Cartel de los Soles, heavily involved in drug trafficking and smuggling inside the country. So one of the things to consider also from the civil affairs perspective is any local partner, any relationship, any support, or any joint operation or coordination with these agencies will have the personnel involved on that will have to be extremely vetted. It's going to require a lot of vetting and a lot of taking things with a grain of salt. This is something that's going to take some time in order to get properly handled. the next item or the next reality to face in this space will be that many of these organizations have spent the past 20 years developing relationships at many levels, not only operational, but also from the economic side with our adversaries, such as Russia, Iran, China, and Cuba. Their exchange of efforts has gone from sharing intelligence, military equipment. Russia is the primary main foreign weapon supplier to the country. Iran actually, aside of having agreements and cooperation agreements with the local oil company PDVSA. In addition to that, they have also struck deals with the government for the development of drones and also set up factory of drones inside the country. China, on the other hand, has gone through what they know best, which is getting involved in financing infrastructure and also getting a lot of projects going on the country with their usual debt trap diplomacy. So this is something that it is pretty much how they have operated in many other places, but in the case of Venezuela, they have had a big footing in there for the past 20 years. So this is something that it will have to be a part of the civil affairs operational reality as they deal into the ground and see how that gets dealt with as the time goes by. And again, extreme vetting, it's going to be something very, very important. Political opposition does not escape this reality. Unfortunately, the political opposition in the country for the past 20 years has also been, for that great portion of that, being involved in a very quasi-complacive, relationship with the government, with few exceptions. So this is something that, in order to move forward and have some joint efforts and some joint agreements, making sure that stream vetting is going to be a real effort. Next one. And the other thing to consider from the security perspective is the reality that is taking place in the ground in the south side of the country. The illegal mining has become the funding source for a lot of terrorist groups. They are currently operating in the southern half of Venezuela. If we have to name a few, will be the dissidents of the FARC, the leftist terrorist movement from Colombia. When they demobilized out of Colombia, they set up shop in the southern portion of the country. They took control of some of the illegal mines, and they've been funding some of their operations out of the illegal trade or the black market trade of gold and other precious minerals. The same thing with the ELN. They have been doing that already for quite some time, and this is something also, therefore, if we're looking into long-term strategy for an stabilization operation and also restoring civil unrest in case of insurgency, this will be something to definitely will have to be looked into from that perspective. The money and the funds that goes out of these illicit activities, they're funding many things in Venezuela. They're creating a challenge for any transitional government, and as such, it becomes a problem not only from the economic perspective, but security, and also even for the oil industry, as many companies from the outside will have problem bringing in staff willing to stay on the country as long as this environment persists. So from what does that mean for the civil affairs operations and implications is reestablishing state authority in these areas, it will have to be paramount. How governance goes back into those areas and these illicit activities get under control will be something that it will have to be planned for, and definitely, part of the strategy for an stabilization process. Next one. So one item that I want to drill in again will be the interdependence on all this, the three legs of this tool. If we're looking at these three items that we just discussed, like for example, in the case of the oil industry, if there is no investment, if there is no attention and effort into bringing in the technology, the items, the repair, the human talent that is required to pretty much improve an industry that's been neglected for the past 20 years, for many other reasons, it will be very difficult to do anything else on the country unless that is looked at. But by the same token, if you look at the other two legs, for example, transportation and security, even if we make the best of investments or that is the biggest effort placed into revamp that industry, without a transportation network that can really support that, we will have a lot of good material supply just sitting on ships ashore, not able to get to the places they need to get inside of the country because of the bottlenecks in the transportation system. And not only that, then if we have any increases in productions in whether it's oil or gas, and those also will be hindered if we don't have a good transportation system in the country that can support that. And if we look at this from the perspective that having transportation and the industry, but if we have an environment which is highly unstable and dangerous from the security standpoint, also will be a challenge to make sure that these two areas progress, because you will not be able to properly restore or enhance or develop the transportation network nor the oil industry if you have an environment where the rule of law is absent. And this is again how these three legs are connected. So I'm going to make a quick stop right here, and I'm going to turn it to Lieutenant Colonel Ibrahim as for additional comments in the sector of security.
So with regards to rule of law, we've heard, some of the administration officials talk about the hope for democratic elections coming up in Venezuela. Obviously, with the capture of Maduro, a lot has shifted in the country's governance, but it still has not reached to the level that many would like it to reach. You still have political prisoners being held unlawfully, and it doesn't appear that free and fair elections are moving forward at the pace that the United States would like to see it. And quite frankly, if a civil affairs mission were to take off in Venezuela, rule of law would be a central part. As Major Ortiz had mentioned, there's need for strict vetting. There's need to tackle kleptocracy and anti-public corruption, anti-money laundering, which is rampant because of the corruption. These are all issues that, if not brought into bear, the ability for the country to proceed ahead economically, at least for its most valuable resource, the energy industry, it just won't come to fruition. And with that, in discussions that Major Ortiz and I have had, we have to be realistic that Venezuela is not going to be the United States as far as the regulatory environment where we pursue and prosecute public corruption and money laundering. And quite frankly, no country in the world has a zero, public corruption. There is a little bit of that. But we looked at it and we said, what if a civil affairs mission did take off, what would need to happen is kind of equated to like our highway system. Speeding never stops, but we have state troopers out there keeping it at a controlled level so that there's some civil order. And that's what, would initially at least be the goal for rule of law, is to establish a rule of law. Their constitution is outdated, and for several decades now, the constitution they do have has not been adhered to. It's been completely, ignored by the leaders. So rule of law in the aspect of the security of the country will play a critical role as well. Victor?
Yes. And thank you, sir. So, and just to add to what Colonel Ibrahim was mentioning, one of the main challenge also on the rule of law perspective is to look at the legislative part and see how that goes in tandem with the and supports the efforts of the subsequent regimes or the subsequent administrations in the country. Aside of the issue of the corruption, you also have an issue about that there are existing laws in the country that are very adversarial to foreign investments. And just to cite an example is the hydrocarbons laws, which that law is being used by the government to apply to many other goods and services that are deemed to be of critical nature to the country. The way that that law right now has a couple of articles in it is that any item or any asset, that's actually the term that is used on the law, any asset that is brought to the country and is deemed to be critical for the development of the country, whether or the good of the people, as they mentioned, once it makes it into the country, even if it is owned by a private sector, it cannot be taken out of the country. So if you bring in a oil drill to the country, the company that does that as of right now needs to understand that that oil drill, once it sits or hits the Venezuelan soil, is not coming out by law, regardless of who owns it. So one of the only consequences of laws like this is that some of the companies, or a lot of the companies, they comes to the country and they bring assets and they make investments into the oil industry. Obviously, they're not bringing their top line, top notch technology when it comes down to assets, because they know that once they hit the country, it's going to be a little bit hard to get them out, and they're going to have to do some sort of a trading in order to get their monies back for that particular item once that item ceased to serve its purpose. So things like that will have to be looked at from the legislative perspective in order to make sure that it is more attractive for foreign investments. Next. So going into the wrap up and the summary, the situation in Venezuela, it's going to be quite complex from the civil affairs perspective. And the reason for that is because we have different factors. They are complex in nature. They have been working with each other for a long time, and disrupting that ecosystem that is taking place or has been taking place for the past 20 years is going to require very intentional efforts and very targeted approach to some of the key components they are sustaining that item. The fact that their president, Maduro, has been taken out of the office, that has brought in quite a bit of changes, from the leadership perspective, and also we have seen some changes taking place by the following administration. However, the huge bulk of the existing apparatus in these three industries, on these three concerns, it still remains. So going in and having to hit the top two priorities, the way I describe it, for any stabilization mission, which is restoring security and restoring essential services, that's going to be probably a priority going in. But having to deal with these three particular sectors will have to be the day two concerns if we want to have, number one, in Venezuela that has a way higher production in oil and gas from what they have today. Two, in Venezuela that can produce or have a legalized mining industry, and also we have a better control of the rare minerals and how they are exploited and whatnot. And number three, a place where it has not become a breeding ground for terrorist groups in the southern portion of the hemisphere, and also supporting other terrorist groups or subversive groups in other countries around the area. So this is going to be a very strategic effort, and it's one that was going to require a lot of efforts, not only from the civil affairs perspective, but also in conjunction with the State Department, obviously. But those will be our point of effort. And lastly, when we're talking about priorities and working with the locals, vetting local partners, I cannot stress that enough. Direct support of the civil administration will be critical, but vetting local partners and vetting the remaining military officials will be also paramount to make this an operation or this effort very successful. Next.
So that was a really good presentation, Major Ortiz. I do want to kind of open up to some questions. If anybody in the audience has questions, please post it. But I do want to start off, clearly the thrust of your discussion this evening and surrounds the security situation on the ground. I'm going to quote from an article. Retired Army General, Major General John Ferrari recently wrote, "The United States still cannot achieve durable outcomes in war without controlling terrain, populations, and political end states." And that quote was in the context of, you know, uh, that boots on the ground, are still a mandatory requirement to achieve end state. With that said, if a civil affairs mission were to take off, or a much larger mission were to take off, you know, phase four post stabilization operations, if you will, how what resolution do you have would you recommend for the corruption and the public corruption, the criminal entities, the foreign, this unholy alliance between the, foreign terrorism organizations, criminal entities, the politicians who have really been entrenched in the system for a long time?
Absolutely, sir. So, my initial reaction to that will be that, based on the reality that we have seen on the ground, the primary everything starts from the top. It has to be an administration, a local administration that supports the anti-corruption efforts and is really committed to that. The next point of that, following that, will be a revamp of the legislative system in which they need to incorporate laws that are targeting specific crimes from the drug trade perspective, but also corruption. That has to be something that is very intentional and specific on the new legislation. The other piece of that, sir, will be the judicial system. There has to be a substantial cleanup of the judicial system, and there have to be special courts dedicated to address the issue of corruption. This is something that has happened in other places. It will be something that is tried, in which there. And I want to use the case of Colombia in past years when they were dealing with the issue of widespread terrorism and also drug trade. They at some point they established a special courts to deal with that, in which the judges and also the DAs were not their identities were not shared with the public, so there was like a private court. And something similar will have to happen in Venezuela. There will have to be a specific and very intentional effort to weed out the issue of corruption, which it may take a generation to deal with. It's not going to be an overnight effort, but that will have to be that. I think if once the situation goes into a point where people are witnessing open and fair trials related to corruption and drug trades, and people doing their time as a result of that, eventually but surely that should be creating an atmosphere where corruption is, like you said, it's not eliminated entirely, but it's brought down to acceptable levels. And the other leg of that too will be education. There has to be also a very intentional investment and effort into promoting education, promoting watch groups, independent watch groups that can educate the people into the harms and the problem that corruption brings to the society. Corruption is not a crimeless crime, and so it's not a victimless crime. So they need to understand how that goes. So those will be probably the efforts. They will become very helpful in enforcing the law, and also kind of break the unholy alliance between some of the government officials and some of these terrorist group and also drug cartels.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's called it the day two mission, and it seems like, rule of law, our JAGs, our international legal officers, and some of our other experts would be really needed at that moment to help draft some of that with, alongside those their host nation counterparts. I'd like to shift the focus for a moment. There's a question that came through, and we kind of talked about this earlier today. The diaspora of Venezuelans outside of Venezuela, both in the United States and around the world, is pretty significant. There's been a mass exodus for quite some time of Venezuelans leaving Venezuela. And I think it's pretty well documented that that tends to be more of the educated and the wealthy who have taken their corporate knowledge and stepped out, or their institutional skills and knowledge and left. In the event that it becomes a more democratic society or a more permissible environment, do you see the diaspora getting involved in the recovery of Venezuela?
Yes, absolutely, and there will be a lot of involvement on that. It's been back in 2003, when the Chavez regime fired overnight 40,000 people, mostly engineer and oil experts from the oil industry, and that happened in a couple of days via TV, by the way. These people left the country shortly after, and this is people that have a stream that has been regarded in the industry for years before that as a very good expert, extremely admired experts in the industry, and they went to work in Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil for the oil companies. But all this expertise, it's already forming part of international organizations in support to the Venezuelan exiles, and they have pledged already intentions to go back to the country to rebuild that should the conditions allow them to come back. So that just to explain in the oil and construct in the oil and the gas sector. When we're talking about also the security in the countries around the region, I think in a situation like that where we need to get the boots on the ground and you have other countries around, they will be very interested in supporting a stabilization process in the country, given the fact that the migration that has taken place in countries as far as Argentina on the tip end of the hemisphere. People that from Venezuela has traveled to those places on foot, and they have had to take a substantial amount of refugees as a result of the crisis that has happened in the country. So I believe that also there will be a lot of interest from the countries around Venezuela, their neighbors, to make the investment, pledge, and commit efforts to ensure that the stabilization mission or stabilization support is successful, and anything that is incidental to that is provided.
Yeah, that was really good. I think we've heard like over, and you probably know much better numbers, over 1 million refugees have left in recent years. Is it, or I've even heard numbers as high as 8 million.
I was about to say, yes, it's actually on the mid eights they have left the country. And this is taken into account that Venezuela is a country that is in the early 30s, millions of, that's their population in early 30s. So when you're talking about that they have had a population in the past 20 years, they have fled the country as a result of the political instability and also crime and political persecution. And you're talking about 8.5 million out of those have left the country. It's a substantial amount of their people and talent, the human talent that have left the country, um, and also has created a logistical nightmare for the neighboring countries where they have had to provide support shelter and incorporate these people, giving them essential services and providing essential services basically for all that population that have migrated to the neighboring countries. In the case of Colombia, I can tell you that Colombia has been the country that has taken the biggest hit on this, because most of the population, and culturally speaking, Venezuelan and Colombians, they're very alike. So it's the easiest spot for Venezuelans to migrate. But again, as mentioned before, countries like Argentina have received millions of people, and that's something that's it's interesting that something like that's happened in this century.
You know, while we talk about the human factor, when we think about Venezuela, we just can't get away from the energy sector and the amount of resources it has. And it's well known that, the oil coming out of Venezuela, is particularly in certain parts, that middle section of the country that you highlighted, is heavy crude. It's very hard to refine, but it still has a significant value. Venezuela is often said to have the world's largest oil reserves. You did highlight in your presentation the natural gas resources as well, which seem to be, unimaginable numbers in the billions, and in meters. Are there any conflicts with, because we are talking about neighboring countries, and from one aspect, these relationships, well, I should say these relationships with neighboring countries are multifaceted. From one aspect, they want to, repatriate, Venezuelans back to Venezuela. From another aspect, are there cross-border conflicts with extraction, sovereignty rights on different oil fields? Could you touch a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. So the most noticeable one as of now is the existing dispute they have with the a country of Guyana. So, and I don't know if you can go back to one of the slides that show uh, the map. So it will be, let's see, yeah, that one works. So right there under the word that says Trinidad and Tobago. So that area right now has a huge gas field. It's a huge extraction point, and that area right now is under dispute between the two countries. So Guyana currently has an agreement with a couple of American oil companies for the extraction of some of the oil, but some of the gas. But Venezuela is disputing some of those agreements and also saying Venezuela is calling them illegal. So they have right now a dispute of that, given the fact that that's an area that is currently in the international court as under dispute by the two countries. One of the things that had also in the past couple of years ramped up the border disputes between the country was exactly the finding of that gas field, to the point that Venezuela had deployed a few of their naval assets to the area. They were trying to entangle the Guyana security forces in some of these encounters along the river between the border, the land border of the countries. And and this issue got heated to a point that it required a meeting between the two presidents. I would say it was probably at some point in late 2024 where they had to sit down and come up with a way to de-escalate the situation. But as of right now, despite the fact that Maduro was removed from power, the existing Venezuelan government is still pursuing the border dispute, and this is still going to be an issue moving forward for the next administration and also for the civil affairs efforts on the ground.
So as we wrap up in these last few minutes, I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about one more area that I think is important for the audience to know about, which is, there's just so many areas of geopolitical affairs for civil affairs professionals to be involved in, and it's hard to, kind of get down in the weeds. But being your background and with Venezuela, what advances has the U.S. made with regards to the Venezuelan energy industry since Maduro's capture? We've heard that the Secretary of Energy has been down there. Other high profile, I think Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been down there. Where are we right now, and what outcomes have come about since Maduro's capture?
So just to quote back to the statement of the Secretary Rubio about the the three-step plan that he has for the country. And one of them was number one, a kind of have the Venezuelan government to cease and desist cooperation with our adversaries, which that has already taken place. You have many of the companies, like whether it's China or Russia, they have had joint ventures in the country. Those joint ventures are right now inactive. They have moved out of the country a huge deal of their staff, and some of their joint projects right now are pretty much being put on under review. That's the official term. The second one was related to the free of political prisoners. The Venezuelan government has free over 1,000 political prisoners so far. They have many more. They're still in captive. So, but seems to be something that the interim government is doing. I would say strategically, to a point that they want to make sure that they walk a very fine line between cooperating with the U.S. but also maintaining control of the existing government, which is something that is right now a very fine act, given what happened to Maduro. So the interim government what we can see so far is been trying to do is trying to comply with what the U.S. has requested, but on the other hand, do it in a way that their survival is not jeopardized. The last phase of that step would be or that plan would be to run free elections, and that's yet to be seen. As you mentioned, there's some plans about possibly doing that in the near future, but nobody has come forward with a particular date or any level of certainty on that. So that's on that aspect. On the aspect of oil and the other industries, what has taken place is the Secretary of Energy has paid a couple of visits to the country. Right now, the commerce of the oil assets, or the energy, the oil and gas, has been managed out of the U.S. So meaning like China, countries as such, India, they've been trying to purchase gas and oil. They're doing that through the management of the U.S. and U.S. Affiliate companies. And then they have gone to Venezuela, pick up their oil or gas, but the commercial piece of that is being handled by the U.S. The other piece of that is there is already been efforts, as of right now, taking place of companies getting hired and coming under contract for supply of materials and also for providing services and beginning the reconstruction of the oil refineries and industry. But especially, there have been a lot of efforts into the production drills. There has been a lot of emphasis on that, and this has been also managed out of the U.S. So there's companies in the U.S. with the support of the private sector and the government, in which they have start issuing small contracts for these assets and these services to start going inside of the country. So that's what we have as of today.
Yeah, I really appreciate you kind of getting down into the really, the down deep level on this topic. I mean, it's difficult for all of us to walk away and know every aspect of what you discussed, but I think we do walk away knowing, hey, this is a very nuanced problem set, and any civil affairs professional who ends up in country or dealing with this problem set really has to get into the nuance because these problems are not going to be resolved strictly at a strategic level. And it really needs professionals on the ground who will take the time to understand the cultural aspect, the financial aspect, the security aspect, all the factors that go into what may potentially happen with Venezuela. With that, I want to thank Major Ortiz for being here today and presenting and sharing his expertise. On behalf of Colonel Scheck and CSM Harvey, we want to again thank the Civil Affairs Association for hosting us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. This was fascinating, and I appreciate the perspective coming in from Southcom. We are going to shift. We're just about 2 minutes ahead of schedule, but I think I saw Ed Park on earlier. So Ed, if you've got your team ready to go, we can just jump right into 351 and the Indo-PACOM space.
Sounds good. Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Ed Park. I am the Deputy Commander for 351 CACOM for 3 more days. I wanted to provide perspective on civil affairs in the Pacific. During my tenure as the CACOM DCO, we've been really focused on integrating with the Theater Army, U.S. Army Pacific, and ensuring that we deliver civil affairs effects at the tactical through strategic levels. And so rather than hear me talk, I thought it'd be appropriate to have USARPAC, key USARPAC personnel that we've worked with give their perspective on what they've seen from us. And so I've got 2 speakers. The first is Dr. Bryan Mullins, and the second is Major Matt Lee. So each will have, we'll take about half of our time, and we'll open with questions. And we'll start with Dr. Mullins. So Dr. Bryan Mullins is the Deputy G5 for U.S. Army Pacific, located at Fort Shafter, Hawaii. Dr. Mullins worked in the USARPAC G45, Logistics, War Plans, and Exercises for 2 years prior to serving in this current position. Since joining USARPAC in the summer of 2021, Dr. Mullins has worked extensively on refining and delivering goals outlined in USARPAC's internal strategy and campaign plan, linking O-plan requirements to the exercise program and posture objectives, and better integrating INDOPACOM's O-plan-based specified tasks for the land component across the command. Dr. Mullins will talk about some civil affairs challenges and roles within the overall context of land power in the Pacific in the coming decade. And so with that, Dr. Mullins, over to you.
Thanks, Ed. Quick radio check if you got me okay.
I can hear you just fine, and I see you.
Yeah. So everybody out there in the audience, I appreciate you. Probably most of you, it's about 1900 at night. I'm coming from I'm sitting in front of the gym on Fort Shafter. That's the only place we get Zoom this installation. The cool thing is I'm looking at a DDG maintaining station about 2 miles off the coast, off of Pearl Harbor. So it sucks I'm sitting outside for this meeting. It's pretty cool that I'm watching joint combat power as I sit here where I am right now. Ed mentioned it. I'm in the G5, and I've given this disclaimer before to folks. Everything that I share is from a very narrow lens. I hope that my co-panelists from USARPAC will give you a different perspective, right? I'm all doom and gloom. I'm all about the war plans and then what we do in posture for the war plans, which is probably about 5% of what USARPAC spends its time and energy on. And I could say the same thing for INDOPACOM. I'll hit you with 3 bumper stickers up front and then try to wrap this up into the rest of my comments. I'm probably likely to go a little bit long. So Ed, if you need to get me on track or shorten things up, I'm completely comfortable with that. The 3 bumper stickers or themes that I would offer to the group is, as we've worked with INDOPACOM over the last 3 or 4 years in alignment with OSD and now OSW, I would say that the combatant command in the Pacific is in a hurry. What do I mean by that? The indicators and warnings here in an unclassified net, they've gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. Over the last 20 or 30 years, we've gone from we kind of start the war or we control the war and we drive the tempo. That has gone away. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody on this net that the amount of time that we have to know that we're in a war and react has gotten to the point where if you're not already in theater with some capability, you're almost irrelevant. And you can imagine how challenging that is when I talk to the Army, which is big and heavy. The Pacific is a big ocean. Or when I talk to Compo 2 and 3 audiences, or primarily Compo 2 and 3 audiences, how challenging that is that you've got to be ready to go, PACOM parlance, 7 days from now, 10 days from now. And I always say, even for us at Fort Hood, 45 days from notification to showing up somewhere with equipment. So that's a challenge. PACOM is in a hurry, at least in the initial stages of the fight. You don't win the fight in the first, pick a number, week. But you sure as heck can lose the fight in the first 10 to 30 days. The second thing that I would emphasize is PACOM is all about the war fight. You first have to establish credibility on talking about how you prevent an enemy seizure of key terrain in the Pacific. Then you earn the right to talk about protraction, to talk about other activities that will occur simultaneously or after the conflict. And I've watched USARPAC on the inside, and I watched USARPAC up at INDOPACOM kind of miss that message, right? Like, I think we spend sometimes a little bit too much time talking about the other stuff without first giving value proposition to the first crunchy portion of that big conflict. And then the last thing I would say is, because of the emphasis, because of the first 2 themes that I just started with, PACOM doesn't get around to, or tends not to have a lot of time and energy to talk about what comes if you win, great. The war is in essence over and you have off ramps and things are not a problem. But if you just don't lose, then we all understand that we enter this period of contraction. We haven't thought a lot about that. We haven't spent a lot of time on the tip fid for the next phase. We haven't spent a lot of time on the tasks assigned to the services in those next phases. That's frustrating for an Army audience who thinks about resourcing and validating forces and mission sets because we don't have a piece of paper signed by the INDOPACOM commander that we can kind of point to or reference. So those are my three big themes. And I just hammer home a few so what's or where I draw those conclusions from. If you haven't oriented yourself to the new national defense, newish national defense strategy, there's a unclassified version, a secret version, and a top secret version. They're all remarkably consistent, and it's surprising how much you get out of the unclassified version. You don't actually have to read the top secret version. If you reach out to Ed or myself, we can share those across whatever mediums you want. But I can tell you that the unclassified is sufficient. If you don't have access to unclassified, just read Strategy of Denial by OSDP, Colby, Bridge Colby. That is sufficient. There's a good enough carryover. It explains everything. Homeland defense. So what? Three big things, or two big things and an addendum. Homeland defense. That's a real deal. If you haven't gotten sucked into that space, we are no longer, if we ever were, we're not paying lip service to that. It is a big deal, and we're spending a lot of mental energy on how you make that reality. Denial defense of the first island chain. Again, look at strategy of denial. Denial defense implies that you're already there or you're there very quickly. And then there's some language about Korea, taking a backseat to the 20, 30-year history that we've all understood of what we thought we were going to do in Korea. It's changed a lot. And if you're talking about life in the Pacific, you need to understand that nuance. All of the strategic documents have been republished here in the last 6 to 12 months. They're all very consistent. If you haven't looked at the defense planning guidance, that's very interesting. It goes hard after the Army. It tells the Army that it is the wrong force for the challenges of the 21st century. You can agree or disagree with that. We may have some lessons emerging out of Venezuela, out of Epic Fury that are causing people to reconsider that. But they just updated the defense planning guidance last week, and it still retains most of that aggressive language, challenging language that the Army needs to change a lot and beyond what the Army Transformation Initiative established. If you're interested, we redid our strategy, Theater Army strategy. It is a decent document that shows how we're trying to nest ourselves with all these other higher things. I can talk later in the questions portion about O plans, two big O plans. O plans are interesting. Tip bids are science and what matter. And you can talk a big game in an O plan. The tip bid proves whether or not you can do it. So that is where I can talk a little bit more about this, why I say we're in a hurry and how we think. And then the last two things that I would just provide as a context here is we did this thing called Unified Pacific 26. If you're aware of that, great. If you're not, it was a major war game that we did in the Department of the Army at the DC area about 4 or 5 months ago. It goes back to my comment about changing the Army to be more relevant to the 21st century. There's some interesting outcomes of that. I can talk about that if that's interested to anybody, interest of anyone. The thing that I would say that's a little concerning is I perceive the Army continues to look for silver bullets. The reason for that is in a budget-constrained environment, in a resource-constrained environment, you're always looking for something that is really powerful, but in essence cheap or effective. The Army keeps looking for that. I think history suggests to us that there are seldom any silver bullets. But UP26 started to illustrate some of those high-value propositions that are interesting to INDOPACOM and OSW. And then the last thing is we've extrapolated from that. I think we call USARPAC Ready Forward, which is kind of like a bare minimum set of what we think we need in the Pacific by the summer of 27, and then progressive bites out to 29, 31, etc. So that's it for my opening comments. Then I'll pass the floor over to Ed.
Do you have any questions from the group?
Monsieur, I see your hand.
Greetings, Mr. Wright. I'm a Turkish crisis management expert and foresight practitioner. My question is the media doing justice or when it comes to covering the urgency, the threats, and the instabilities that you are feeding? and I concur the importance of unclassified information. A year ago, during a CIMIC conference where there was a considerable number of college students, they were really trying to push for information sharing and access to classified material. And I did emphasize the fact that there's no secret kingdom where there would be so much information that there's a whole lot more information in the unclassified domain. Thank you, Bryan.
Yeah, you can imagine that my answer about your first question is with peril. So this is Bryan Mullins. This is not the Deputy G5 at USARPAC. This is just a guy, and this is his opinions. You have seen, if you're paying attention, you've seen over the last 18 months of how the Pentagon has gone in a deliberate manner to try to close up the narrative, close up leaks. Right? They want to control what the message is, and they have slowly but surely sent the message to us that they're not interested in us sharing other opinions with the greater media. That's kind of an established fact of the last 18 months. I think the media is too smart to be completely surprised or confused or led along by their nose, right? The narratives that you've heard coming out of the media in the first weeks of Epic Fury hit on the right concerns, the global balancing act that the United States needs to maintain. They hit on a lot of the key themes of how many simultaneous engagements, how many protracted conflicts can you keep doing, how many glass balls can you keep in the air at once. I won't go any further than that. I won't speculate. Right. Even before Epic Fury was the war in Ukraine, even before the war in Ukraine, like we live the reality of no matter how much money you throw at the Department of War, it seems like we always want 5 times more than that. And so there's never enough resources. Every commander has a compelling story as to why they matter and why the risk that they face should not be overlooked. And so I'm not going to speculate. I'm deeply concerned about how much progress we've made in the 5 years that I've been at USARPAC. We have a long way to go before we have some assurances that we've reduced risk to an acceptable level. And then if you could restate your second question, that would be appreciated.
That was actually more of a comment, and then please allow me to direct actually another comment. Back in 2013, I raised China as a threat in the sense that not specifically China, but complacency in assessing the threat on a shared risk perception conference. And I coined the term Sinoism, in the sense that just like Maoism, there's a certain complacency and neglect or downgrading of the threat. And actually, that kind of manifested itself during COVID. Thank you very much, sir.
Any other questions for Bryan at this point?
If there are no more, I do have one. Bryan, are you still there, Bryan?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's no secret that as Army Reservists, our support and our presence to support the Theater Army is episodic, with coming to major exercises or planning conferences there at Shafter. We had talked about this before, I think, during PAC Century. But from your perspective, when you saw 351 in the exercise, can you explain like what capability or product or thing that we brought that kind of surprised you?
And so positives and negatives, right? I think, I don't know, I can speak from my experience. I had interaction with civil affairs units primarily at the tactical level. Maybe I'm a quote normal active duty veteran. Saw civil affairs in a very tactical aspect, primarily in Iraq, a little bit in Afghanistan, and in Kosovo. I think, Ed, the thing that we always work through and struggle with, and I was kind of hinting to this in my opening, is our exercise program is so heavily skewed towards early days of combat that I think it puts the civil affairs community in a tough spot to show value proposition in high intensity combat, right? So that's my challenge back to the civil affairs community is you got to have multiple tools in your box. But then in that context, when I saw the intelligence that you could provide that would inform all flavors of maneuver, offensive, defensive, focus on the homeland defense mission, what our allies might need, that was eye-opening. And how far along you were in consolidating that information and turning it into intelligence to help commanders see the problem and understand the problem. Super powerful. I think you would probably say or agree that I think it was in Keen Edge where the USARPAC staff started to understand, the engineers, the intelligence community, and the planning community started to see how you guys could, number one, see the situation, two, fill in gaps in the situation, and then I think the last piece is then do something about it, right? We're still in a discussion space about how do we use you in the early days of conflict. We're pretty clear on how we would use you on the back end. How would we use you on the front end to better talk to our allies, to better talk to governments, right? Because the Homeland Defense mission implies a lot of conversation with state, local, federal agencies, and we're just not experts at that. You guys are a lot smarter at that. So those were some of the observations I had, Keen Edge and PAC Century.
Thank you. And I see a question in the chat from Mr. Cahill. Do you want me to read that, Mr. Cahill, or do you want to ask it?
No, you can go ahead. Thank you.
This morning, we heard from the CTAF Civil Affairs Battalion Commander who oriented us to many CA teams actively engaged in a variety of mission sets across 11 or more countries in Africa. I believe we have a CA battalion under Task Force Oceania operating across many islands in the Indo-PACOM AOR. Can we hear a little bit about what CA teams are doing there? That is a great segue into the next speaker. He's the company commander of Oceania Engagement Team Rotation 7. He currently has his teams out in that subregion. So if we can table that to Major Lee's talk. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Dr. Mullins, do you want to talk? Do you have any thoughts on the civil affairs from your seat, what they're doing in Oceania? Over.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that. I know it's important. I know it's a smart way to use civil affairs, and don't be offended, as an economy of force, to make progress in a place that we can't accomplish much with our more traditional approach, with the pathways approach. But you definitely have the expert queued up for that.
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments? I see the 351 CMOC chief is also dialed in. So Dr. Mullins knows as well. Scott, anything?
Dr. Mullins covered as usual.
Okay. Well, if there are no other comments or questions, Dr. Mullins, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you supporting the CAA and 351.
Right, and I'm standing by if there's anything else as we continue.
Okay. And with that, we will transition to the Oceania Engagement Team, Rotation 7. The mission commander is Major Matt Lee. He is the commander of Charlie Company 425 Civil Affairs Battalion. And please bear with me as I try to bring up his slides. Matt, are you online?
Hey, sir. Yep, online. Same limb fact that Dr. Mullins had of Zoom not working in the building, but don't have the great view that Dr. Mullins has. I'm staring at the 500th MI Brigade headquarters, so not as great, but still online. As the slides come up, I'll just do a quick intro for OET. There's a question. I'm really glad that Dr. Mullins went before me because he kind of gave the scene setter, laid in a few points that I was going to talk about of USARPAC's ready forward concept. How do you get left of bang? How do you get into theater? And OET, Oceania Engagement Team, as a direct example of that, we are one of the few persistent presences west of the IDL, not just for civil affairs, but for USARPAC writ large. It's a mission that recently did transition under 351. So just like Colonel Park mentioned, we are a civil affairs company in the 351 hierarchy. We're sourced out of 358 CA Brigade and specifically 425 CA Battalion. So did want to give a shout out to Colonel Keenhan, Colonel Park, Colonel JP Lecedra for their support during our workup. I'll give the overview of our team's mission, some of the challenges in the Oceania region of the Pacific, which most people think of, and you'll hear me mention places like Fiji, Palau, very permissive, very pleasant places to be. And I'm absolutely in agreement that these are very nice places. But there is a subversive layer to that. There is malign influence being exhibited by the PRC in Oceania. And I think the first slide that we can transition to, sir, kind of goes over a quick threat picture, all pulled from open source. But in these Pacific Island countries, in these places that are mostly known as tropical getaways, they do play a role in USARPAC's ability to project power, whether there are posture locations scattered throughout Oceania, whether we have various force flow approaches in the theater army strategy for USARPAC. We talk about the central and southern approach into theater. These Oceania, these Pacific Island countries are on the direct line of advance into the theater. And so while we might not be the first island chain, we are present. And so the deliberate move and transition under 351 was to counter that. How do you promote normalize U.S. presence? How do you shape the theater? I'll talk about that a little bit in the operational approach on the following slide. But these are just 4 aspects that this rotation started approximately 2.5 months ago. But all of these influence activities that the CCP projects into country, whether it's the academic and the standing up of Confucius Institutes, promoting Chinese languages in Micronesian schools or throughout Oceania. These businesses that pop up, curb away, Tongan small businesses from standing up, but really entrenching Chinese investment in the local economy. Destabilization efforts, whether it's the influx of drugs, crime, gangs, or the promotion of those to further destabilize the countries that, the PRC and that host nation may not have a great working relationship, develop a need where that host nation really does need to go to the CCP. And then, of course, the cultural friendship, the sports, the music, the religion, the soft power approaches, along with BRI that the PRC exemplifies in these countries. And so major takeaway from this slide was to show that while the public may think of Oceania as a great region, you think of Australia and New Zealand as one of our strongest Five Eye partners. There are nascent activities. There is malign influence being projected out. And so the next slide will kind of go into our answer, our USARPAC, our 351, our US DOW response to that. And that's the OET, the mission set. And so for OET, I think there was a mention of, Task Force Oceania. The OET mission has been going on for quite some time. It used to be dubbed Task Force Oceania. I think the naming has changed a few times, but we've settled on OET. And so Colonel Park mentioned this being rotation number 7. Rotation number 7 of OET and a revamped mission set of hard focus on being the eyes and ears on ground for USARPAC to enable intelligence, enable operations. And so with that, I see 8 teams, 8 civil affairs teams spread across, some in persistent locations, some episodic. I base the headquarters out of Hawaii for direct USARPAC integration, as well as coordination with organizations such as 500 MIB, First Theater Information Advantage Detachment. And so primary purpose of that headquarters is to really be the interlocutor and really integrate into the USARPAC ONI. I think I did hear a question though, so I'll pause here if there was a question.
I don't think I heard anything on my side, Matt. I think you're good.
Hey, Matt, this is Dave Kesmerick. I got a quick question for you. So I had actually read, I think it was yesterday, Solomon Islands specifically, PRC and some of their outreach in terms of providing essentially the local police forces and things a pretty robust surveillance capability, and trying to get that stuff adopted. And then obviously the islanders in certain villages and things we're pushing back. Can you speak anything on that, kind of on this net? Over.
Absolutely, sir. And so for Solomon Islands, episodic country where DepSec State Landau's visit or his renewed interest in reinvigorating all diplomatic relations in Oceania really spurred us to, Solomon Islands, we haven't put an OET on ground there, but we are any USARPAC presence. Our OET was able to enable an EOD team to also conduct an assessment there. But the thing you're referring to, sir, there was a regime change. The prime minister switched out. And our understanding of the situation, the new prime minister comes from a region from, very pro-U.S., whereas the previous governmental administration, not so pro-U.S. And so with that, there is an appetite for increased U.S. partnership. The PRC way of business was, work. Some of these Oceania countries, these countries in the Pacific, don't have standing militaries. And so tactic being partner with the local security force, send a police advisory team. If they do have a standing military, can we get into just the security arena? Can we work our way into advising your military? And so we've noticed that across the board. The surveillance donations, we've seen that in Fiji across pretty much across the gamut. And then our kind of response is, not to take away from Department of State. Department of State definitely has some of the legal grounds for some of the security cooperation initiatives, but alerting Department of State of being the eyes and ears not only for USARPAC, the joint force for all joint interagency partners, that these things are happening. If they've already picked it up, absolutely, and they've got the SIG for it, absolutely. But things that they might not be seeing because they're focused on priority 1, 2, and 3, can OET be the answer for priority 4, 5, and 6, or just things that aren't on their radar? Hopefully that answers it, though, sir.
Thank you.
I just also had this is Basir Riot. I'm a civilian Turkish crisis management expert, sir. Also, what about smart cities? Because smart cities are very are the modern day Trojan horse. So are there also smart cities initiatives, marketing, or actual deployment? Thank you. Over.
I think the BRI approach does include some like the technology advances that the PRC is trying to do. I know I counter that. This is more a Department of State effort, but cyber resiliency and cyber hardening. U.S. Department of State partners with the organization by the name of CyberCX to increase the cyber resiliency of all these countries. Some of these countries, the only hope for them is hopefully getting a Starlink system. The influx through the Millennium Corporation to how do we have private organizations in the U.S. economy invest in some of these efforts to build up these host nations. We know that's an adjacent effort as well. I think that the main thing of we fully acknowledge that the Chinese has moved to make a more modern host nation. Our answer is okay. That's absolutely good, but can we answer with STEM efforts on our own? I don't want to talk for Indo-PACOM since they're not online, but Indo-PACOM J85 Science and Technology. I think that's a great partner of OET of including in advancing drone. Every country wants drones, but we're experimenting with concepts of medical drone delivery in the Marshall Islands of how do you take medicine to outer atolls. The OET buy-in is, you probably got to have a workforce that can sustain this program. So can we first teach you English, then actually improve your math and science ability, and can you improve the workforce after that? And that workforce then goes into these drone maintenance centers. And so hopefully that answers your question as well, sir.
Thank you very much. Wonderful news, and thank you for the assessment, sir.
Oh, appreciate it. I think I'll go into like the quick scene setter for OET again, though. But 8 civil affairs teams. We have persistent presence in the locations you see on green, and then episodic, and very proud of the episodic effort of it's an episodic civil affairs team based in Hawaii that kicks out to the Solomons, to Vanuatu, to Kiribati. Quick turn efforts of they may be on ground for only 2 or 3 weeks, but they're able to really normalize the U.S. presence. I think Solomon Islands is once again enabled a EOD assessment out of the USARPAC G34 and HTSC subordinate EOD assets. So that goes into 3 of our focus areas of setting the region, normalizing U.S. presence, but also doing actions on ground. How do those actions on ground enable the operations intelligence process that USARPAC and the Joint Force have? I think proof of that in terms of do you have tangible proof? Absolutely. That amount of serialized reports that we're able to take the XMs and the assessments that these CA teams do. How do we get them into serialized intel reporting that not only USARPAC G2, but Indo-PACOM, JIOC, and everybody else in the IC can use, really deliberately being the eyes and ears. Atmospherics and sentiment built into that. And I think the picture that you see is our big push is, get into systems of records. Maven's where we do a lot of our civil network development. We partner with the 95th CKC for a lot of the best practices from 95th. And that partnership hopefully is like a standard that we can codify in a USARPAC annex or some kind of SFP to direct everything, all the civil affairs entities at underneath USARPAC. And that includes First Corps. I think Colonel Hansen came down here, and he's been a great partner, even working adjacently with some of the other components such as SOCPAC. I think we're all trying to create our mini civil affairs center of excellence, and it starts with some of the tools that we use. And so, Maven Smart System, the Palantir product, not only is our civil air COP that we try and promulgate, but also, a feed into the targeting process, the actual human network development, expand access and placement. Our MedCaps, EdCaps, VetCaps, any of the programs, the projects, we leverage ODACA heavily for funding, but everything done for both like the overt public facing good news story approach, but also doing these in places where, whether it's the Department of State, whether it's prior rotations or it's other service components for PAC partnership, PAC Angel, they just don't get out to some of these places. Oceania covered largely by water, but the land masses in some of these islands, unless you're a tribal leader, you're probably not going to visit those. Or if you do want to visit, you need the invitation. How do we promote using a medical initiative such as a physical exam in these outer villages and gaining access to understand those? And then establish mutual cooperation. This is the thing that will run across all OETs. I think the differentiation between OET Rotation 7 is a heavy emphasis on Focus Area 1 and Focus Area 2, but the mutual cooperation of how do we build a more resilient host nation, a more sustainable host nation, and how do we ultimately have the U.S. as well as USARPAC being a partner of choice. And so that comes through our normal embassy engagement, any of the projects that we do out in the community, but that is like a forefront for everything. So I'll summarize this one because I think I might have gone over time, but our OETs actively working. They are west of the IDL. They are forward. They are doing the overt public host nation resiliency building and sustainability building, but we're also, we are an extension of the theater army. There has to be some kind of military payoff. And so that comes through enabling the intelligence operations process, supporting and making better future U.S. mil OAIs in Oceania. And so, I'll close there, but appreciate everybody's time and then happy to take any questions.
Hey, Matt, there was one question in the chat, which I'm guessing you probably are on your phone, so let me read it for you. It says, understanding this is unclassed, can you speak to what is driving your targeting and mission development for both the persistent and episodic teams? Are they supporting unit directed, or are you all developing internal and submitting for approval?
No, appreciate it, ma'am. Yeah, for our what spurs a lot of these episodic engagements, one, the criteria is, can we actually put boots on ground in these countries? I think Kiribati is a tough challenge. Even some of these other organizations, Department of Defense, POW, Accounting Agency, DPAA, good partner here. Their mission is very altruistic and great of recovering POWs from a lot of these Oceania countries that we fought World War II battles. Their feelers were, oh man, it's gonna be hard to get to Kiribati. So first one is, can we get into this country? Two is, what is like the value? Sometimes the value is just uncharted need. Sometimes it's tippers from the country teams and the embassies that do cover these countries. So the embassy in Suva and the mill group in Suva kind of covering down on Kiribati. Or if there's a way to get in, there's an appetite for U.S. forces, then the third then goes into what will we do as OET in that country. And largely, it's going to be, hey, can it just enable future U.S. mil relations with that country? I already mentioned that some of these places don't have militaries, but the security sector, the medical sector, 18th Theater Medical Command, as one of our partners as well. Them being a great resource to enable future medical discussions, EOD, the Humanitarian Mine Action Program, as a resource, just because there's a heavy amounts of UXO from World War II in some of these battles. So how do we just influx the DoD, or as it was the DOW or USARPAC, other entities into these countries? Now for kind of target development, partnership with the G2, and I kind of let the G2 take over that process, but do we participate in some of the targeting boards? We're trying to get that more up and running. I think it's probably, very transparently something that we're trying to do better on. But for, step one was provide something of value, and that comes from the IARs. Once the IARs are in the ether, I think that enables the target dev process that the G2 kind of runs.
And a question from Dave Kazmarek. How are you integrating information to amplify your actions?
Absolutely, sir. Yeah, for this one, I don't know if any other CACOMs or 95th touched upon the theater information advantage attachments that are springing up, the TIADs. First TIAD, as a direct reporting unit to General Clark and USARPAC, once again, another partner that we leverage. They've kind of, not only does USARPAC have a PAO, they have a dedicated unit to do information warfare. They have CA planners, they have PSYOP planners, they have their own public affairs planner as well. They incorporate all the IRCs into their efforts. And where their focus, very opportunistically, their focus is also on the Oceania subregion. And so with that, whether it's building OETs in some of the PSYOP campaigns and the messaging programs that they have, or working with, I would say, for how do we amplify in the information space, a lot of it comes from our working relationship with Embassy PAO. But in terms of the narrative, what do we want to produce? We'll largely go with TIAD of what's the messaging approach should we take? A lot of it does just stem with like a very simple promote the U.S., normalize the U.S. presence, and by extension, the USARPAC and the USARPAC presence. And so OET, not much enabler support, not a task force or a SOTIF that will come with its own organic G2 or an organic, I would say, IO section. But we do have to, that is a forcing function for us to, once again, use that headquarters to integrate across everybody else in Oahu.
Awesome. I think that's all the hands and questions I've seen.
Hey, Matt, if you can, I apologize for ambushing you. Can you talk about how we cooperate with New Zealand, Australia, and France to solve the problem?
I can try that one, sir. Yeah, the hard part of Oceania. So with OET, Oceania Engagement Team, it is the best way I could phrase it. It is a direct element. I'm the company commander. I'm also the mission commander for OET. In theory, the next commander I would have in my chain is General Clark. But with that, there's got to be layers between myself and General Clark. Major General Lance Akamura as the deputy commanding general for Oceania, active role in overseeing the OET mission, as well as USARPAC Security Cooperation Division. It's actually the office where my cubicle is at, is within USARPAC G3 SCD. USARPAC G3 SCD has an Oceania branch, and they'll cover all the Oceania countries. I think I've covered 11, but their portfolio will extend to Australia and New Zealand. Since they're a Five Eye partner, not many operations, but in terms of partnership with Australia and New Zealand, yeah, they have primacy in Oceania, kind of just like the U.S. might have primacy over other countries. Well, Australia and New Zealand have been doing operations in some of these Oceania countries for quite some time. Their teams are training the police force. They've got consulates and embassies also set up throughout Pacific Island countries. And so we do work alongside of things. In terms of one of the examples I used earlier are priority 1, 2, and 3 might be being done by the Australians. So yeah, let our Five Eye partners take those, and can OET tackle priority 4, 5, and 6. In terms of any issues or things that the New Zealand military or the Australian military is facing internal to the or capacity building internal to those. Not much overlap from OET, but definitely expeditionary. We work alongside our Five Eye partners very well.
No, perfect. And then I think just everybody on the audience out there is, there's relationships that were established primarily in the 19th and 20th century. So Australia is closer to Papua New Guinea and has a better feel for the Solomons than we ever will. The Pacific is huge, and so we divide and try to conquer. I think Matt was dancing around. It's a loose control. I'm not sure how much PACOM has got to stick. We all just kind of to work it out. Our boundaries are informed by the fact that Australia says that they've got primacy in a place, New Zealand's got primacy, and France has primacy, and we try to work together.
I see a hand for Basir.
Just a very quick question. Almost 10 years ago, I was asked about what I thought of China granting early release to very hardened criminals and deploying them to Africa. This kind of ties in with the triad activity. So are there similar practices in your region, sir? Thank you.
I would probably defer to like the intelligence community. I think there's assessed trends that we're seeing of, I think it's a common tactic, not just in the Indo-PACOM AOR, but throughout other AORs as well. If there are diplomatic obstacles that the PRC is facing with host nation X, Y, or Z, how do you incite instability? How do you pronounce themes that, oh, the problem's pretty bad in this country? And so some of these, law enforcement's a big challenge that these host nations have. And so if law enforcement's challenged, the opportunity stabilizes, through what law enforcement does cover. And so I've mentioned narcotics, I've mentioned, and sometimes it's capacity too of, one of the simple-minded ideas that I have is maybe you just need to build jails. Well, there's jails in Palau. It's just these prisoners keep on escaping. So then it goes into a capacity issue of the jails aren't big enough and they keep escaping. So the security to actually provide oversight over these people that are there. And then the prosecution's broken of, we can't actually prosecute, or there's challenges to prosecute. And so all these things lead up to an opportunity for the PRC and the CCP to destabilize these countries. The actual direct connection, I think, are very strong in some cases where we can say, to a level of certainty, I imagine there's a malign influence on some of these factors. But then I think that also varies per country. So answer would definitely be concreted by other smarter people than myself that have spent time researching that. But we have definitely seen, these are pronounced themes, pronounced challenges in these countries.
Thank you very much. I mean, my answer was just looking at it from a counterintelligence standpoint that they could never turn against China and they would be equally very ruthless. Thank you very much, sir.
Any other questions for Matt?
Hey, Matt, you were the first, you were the commander of the first CA company in 351 to take on this mission. So you had no homework to steal from to prep your company. Can you describe your train up for this mission? What worked well? What didn't work well? Never mind the lapse in appropriation while you're mobilizing last fall. What could have gone better? Over.
I think the pros of like the workup that Colonel Park's referring to, and Colonel Park was, I would say, avidly engaged into the oversight to making sure our mobilization deployment went well. Really, it went into how do you form the company, kind of the Tuckman model of storming, forming, norming, performing. How do you form a company? First off, of my time in the reserves, it was kind of definitely brief, but my company was probably 20 strong coming into this. And so there was a concerted effort throughout the battalion, brigade, and the CACOM to staff the appropriate people. And so that was pro number one, find the right people and find the right team of as great as you think. And I had this pie in the sky, I could teach anybody this. Well, time's always there. Murphy's Law is always at play of things popping up, such as a government shutdown. And so finding the right people that, maybe a little bit rough around the edges, but guess what? They're willing to learn. They're very mature and they're very professional. I think that was pro number one. Pro number two was our Valix. And so I wouldn't call it a Stockholm equivalent, but Valixing prior to early enough where we could really assess the strengths and weaknesses and tailor the remaining months that we have on our training pathway to addressing those weaknesses. And so we did work with the Civil Affairs and PSYOP evaluators from NTC. So Sean Blades, his team, I don't know if Sean's still there, but came out. We did a geographically dispersed Valix to simulate the ability to report from different locations. The CA teams operated autonomously without the ability to talk to me every day. And so that was to simulate the Oceania environment. And so I think that the Valix went very well. We learned a lot. I learned a lot in terms of guidance. It tested our systems because we knew Maven coming in was going to be a main thing to integrate into how USARPAC and how Indo-PACOM kind of process information. So a heavy emphasis on Maven, to the point where I would say one of my improvement recommendations is to really integrate the systems of record early, the comm systems of records too. So I think for us, we're still dealing with some communications challenges I haven't touched upon of, NIPR internet, and a large chunk of our reporting is done on SIPR and above. How do you get SIPR from Papua New Guinea back to Hawaii? Well, we do like the unofficial model of like asking, begging, and working with our embassies. Some teams do have SIPR systems. We're on the process of getting WinDARS kits pushed out, and hopefully that's an opportunity that the next rotation after OET7 does and can take advantage of in their workup, and definitely during their mission. And so after our Valix, I think the strong coordination, strong ties with all the players at USARPAC, integrate early and often of Brody Babb. I think Dave Howd before him. Those are the Oceania SCD chairs, also affairs as well. And people that I've worked with, and we're able to really align on the strategy of how does a theater army strategy translate to theater army game plan, and translates to Oceania strategy, and then to a op order that USARPAC put out. The level of guidance I'm very appreciative of. There's so much linkages behind our operational approach and things that different classifications I think was mentioned that Colonel Park could send out. But if we're aligned at echelon by the guidance and strategy that is present, then we're already set up with everybody's got a very good understanding of how to approach this mission, not just as a company commander, but down to the lowest member of a team, the lowest CA NCOs on the teams, really uniting around that. So I think that would be my last pro. I think the only improvement opportunity would be, getting eyes on. Colonel Park mentioned it as well, but we are the first in 351 CACOM post-mission transition. And so a little rough on the RIPTOA, but ideally this mission stays in 351 for rotation to rotation. And so the left seat, right seat being in country, some of the efforts that we set up for the next rotation, just like prior SimC rotations before, of can you set and plan the projects that the other teams executes and they paid for it to the next team after that. We had to get a lot of the processes off the ground. So the improvement opportunity is, if there's a way to set all the processes, not come in with a 25% or a 10%, but ideally we set up the next rotation to come in. I'm sure there's always going to be a level of attrition during transition, but instead of starting from 10% or 0, can we set them up to start from 75 or 75 plus? Over.
Fantastic. Any last questions for the 351 team? All right, I'm going to send it back to Dr. Mullins and Matt and Ed for any closing remarks. It looks like you've exhausted all the questions, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I would just connect the dots. It's kind of a blinding flash of the obvious, but Matt's briefing illustrates how USARPAC and 351st are trying to get around the urgency problem that I started with. You know, people will tell you it is impossible to have the Army forward in 14 days. It is impossible to have Compo 3 in the fight in 14 days. No, it isn't. You put the right teams forward, either in pathways exercises or in a mission set, and then kind of hope that you guessed correctly in the most important place to have Compo 3 people already available at the right place at the right time. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Matt, any parting comments?
No, I think the one question, I think it's not a question that we answer right now, but kind of stemming from Dr. Mullins, it's using this persistent presence, and then how does the OET, or how does the civil affairs asset on the ground then transition from competition to conflict in actual kinetic operations? I think that's the question that we always hope to answer. And looking forward to the conversations. Colonel Park brought it up right before we started this, whether it's I think PAC Century is a forcing function where this came up, but looking forward to answering that in the coming months as well. But appreciate the time, and then, yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I'll let you close it out for your CACOM.
All right. I'd like to thank Doc Mullins and Matt Lee for joining. I'll just say that in my tenure as the CACOM DCO, the highlight of my time has been our integration with the Pacific Theater Army, both through providing civil affairs capabilities and the pathways rotations, as well as getting the unique opportunity to exercise the CACOM level CMOC at the 4-star level. That was really, really satisfying to see during Keen Edge. So with that, thank you to the CAA for giving us this time. And ma'am, back over to you.
Thanks so much. And thanks everyone from 350 and 351 for your remarks this evening, and everyone that signed in with us. I have one last announcement before I pass it back over to General Van Roosen for closing remarks. I just want to remind everybody our next event is going to be November 13th and 14th in the Simi Valley. So that's just outside of LA. We're at the Reagan Presidential Library, and that will be our fall symposium. So again, 13-14 November, you'll see a save the date coming out pretty soon, and some other pieces coming over the next few months. And just a reminder, again, if you've got some authors in your formations, I highly encourage you to have them pick up a pen and paper and start writing their issue paper proposals and get those in. That's always one of those that takes more time than they think. And it's obviously a big lift, but those that have written in the past, I think we've been able to get them published in different locations, whether it be in our own journal or helping direct them in other places. So I encourage folks to flood General Goddard's inbox. And then, so the question with the fall symposium, it is an in-person only. There will not be an online event. So please plan your travel accordingly. And with that, sir, I'm going to pass it back over to you for closing remarks.
General Pogge, thank you very, very much. And to our presenters, this was a particularly outstanding session. I know with the time zones, it's a bit of a challenge. We attempted to deal with that by doing, a morning session that dealt with Europe, Africa, and the Eastern United States, and an afternoon session that's able to deal with Oceania and the Western United States. Hopefully that's a good way to deal with this, to be able to do a roundtable that touches on all of the areas. And I think that, we'll use this as a best practice unless others have better ideas, in which case reach out to Carolyn Pogge and make those suggestions. So again, thank you to all of the presenters for making this Civil Affairs Association event a meaningful and rich one. All of this was very well received. And I know many are looking forward to seeing the recording of these and presentations available so that they can look into it in more depth afterwards. So hope to see many of you at the symposium coming up in November. And with that, back over to you, Carolyn.
Thanks, sir. Unless anybody's got anything else, we are going to close it out for the evening, and we'll see you live and in person in the Simi Valley in November. So thanks so much for calling back in this evening, and I will see you guys in a couple months.